He was dying. And in his last few hours on earth, he didn't ask for his wife. He asked for his mistress. King Edward VII, ruler of the British Empire, Emperor of India, sovereign of the most powerful nation on earth, lay in his palace, slipping away. His wife, Queen Alexandra, was in that room. She had been married to this man for 47 years. She had given him 6 children. She had smiled beside him through every royal portrait, every state occasion, every public ceremony. And now, as he was dying, he wanted someone else. Here is where the story gets complicated. Because Alexandra, she let the woman in, reluctantly, with every ounce of composure she had left. And what happened next inside that room is something most history books gloss over. But we are not going to gloss over it. Stay with me, because this story goes somewhere you do not expect. And the moment that will destroy Alexandra's composure after a lifetime of holding it together is coming. Keep watching. Alexandra Caroline was born in the Yellow Palace in Copenhagen. Her family called her Alex, and for the first 18 years of her life, nobody outside Denmark had ever heard of her. Her father was a minor prince, a distant branch of the Danish royal family. They were comfortable, but not powerful. Alexandra and her siblings reportedly shared an attic bedroom. She spent her childhood doing chores, learning languages, and staying out of the spotlight that wasn't pointing at her anyway. Across the channel, Queen Victoria of Britain had a crisis on her hands. Her son and heir, Prince Albert Edward, known privately as Bertie, was a problem. He gambled, he drank, he chased women. Victoria described him as a constant source of anxiety. She needed to marry him off before he caused a scandal that couldn't be managed. After going through a long list of eligible princesses, the British royal family landed on Alexandra. Their official internal verdict, documented in letters from that period, they called her the only one to be chosen. Not, "We are delighted." Not, "She is perfect." The only one to be chosen. As in, I suppose, you will do. Alexandra had no idea that was how they talked about her. She met Bertie in a small German town. She was charmed enough, and they were married in March 1863. She was 18 years old. A foreigner, newly arrived in a country whose language she was still learning. Within a year, she had her first child. Then came her second. And then came 1867. And the year that changed her body permanently. The fashion trend that came out of what happened to her in 1867 is one of the strangest things I have ever researched. I am going to tell you exactly what women across London started doing and why. That is coming up right after this next part. Alexandra was stunning. The camera had just become widely available, and she was photographed constantly, making her arguably the most photographed woman of the 19th century. Women across Britain studied what she wore and tried to replicate it. She wore high necklines. She wore elaborate choker necklaces. Both became major fashion trends, copied by women who had no idea why they wore them. The truth? She had a scar on her neck from childhood that embarrassed her. The chokers were covering it up. Britain turned its insecurity into a style movement. Now here is the part I mentioned. 1867, Alexandra has just given birth to her third child. And she gets hit with rheumatic fever. It nearly kills her. Weeks of fever, weeks of fighting. And when she finally recovers, she is left with a permanent stiff knee, a limp that she will carry for the rest of her life. Now, what do you think happened next? Women in London high society began limping. On purpose. They were so desperate to copy their beloved princess that they adopted her disability as a fashion statement. They called it the Alexandra limp. Shoemakers across the city started selling mismatched shoes, one heel higher than the other, so that customers could walk the way Alexandra walked. The way she walked because she had been seriously ill. Even at the time, a Scottish newspaper called it out directly, writing that there must be a point where fashionable folly stops, specifically at the imitation of human suffering. She never asked for any of this. She was just trying to survive. And Britain was turning her pain into a trend. Alexandra, for her part, was not bitter about it. She visited hospitals. She sat beside patients, not waving from a doorway, but actually pulling up a chair, holding their hands, and lifting her dress to show them her stiff leg, showing them that she had a disability too. She was the first royal woman to do that. Her hearing was also going. A hereditary condition called otosclerosis had been gradually stealing her ability to hear since childhood. By the time she was queen, it was severe. She was living in increasing silence, surrounded by a court that didn't always slow down for her. But the public? They loved her more for all of it. Not despite her struggles. Because of how she carried them. Now here is the part of this story I really need you to stay for. Because so far, you have heard about a woman who handled everything with grace. What I am about to tell you is the moment when grace was almost completely broken. And the person who broke it was her husband. Keep watching. Prince Albert Edward, the man who would become King Edward VII, had a nickname in private circles, Dirty Bertie. And it was earned. He had affairs throughout their entire marriage. Not discreet ones, affairs that were discussed openly at dinner tables across Europe, that appeared in newspapers, that were so widely known they became part of his public identity. His first serious mistress was Lily Langtry, an actress he became infatuated with after meeting her at a dinner party in 1877. He was publicly inseparable from her for 3 years. Then came Daisy Brooke, a society hostess so indiscreet about her relationship with the prince that people gave her the nickname Babbling Brook. And then came Alice Keppel, the one who stayed. The one who became, in every way except title, a second queen. Alice Keppel was sharp, elegant, and socially brilliant. She met Edward in 1898 when she was 29 and he was 56. Within weeks, she was his official companion. When he became king in 1901, she didn't step aside. She moved in closer. She hosted his ministers in her own drawing room. She acted as a go-between for the king and his government. She helped choose gifts for Alexandra. She was everywhere. And Alexandra knew all of it. What did she do? She traveled. She buried herself in charity work and her children. She wrote warm, funny letters to her family in Denmark. And in public, she was always composed. She had made a decision early in her marriage. She was not going to perform grief for the newspapers. She was going to outlast it. She was going deaf. Her husband made her humiliation a public spectacle, and she outlasted all of it. But there is one more moment, one specific moment, and this is the one I promised you earlier. Edward had been ill for several weeks with bronchitis, and by early May 1910, it was clear he was dying. Alexandra rushed back from abroad when his doctor sent word. What happened next is documented across multiple historical accounts. Edward himself, from his sickbed, asked for Alice Keppel to be brought to him. He wanted to see her. Alexandra was in that room. She had just returned to be at her husband's side. And now she was being asked to allow the woman who had been his companion for 12 years to come and say goodbye. She agreed. Reluctantly, but she agreed. Alice Keppel came. And then, according to accounts from people who were present, Edward VII, lying in his bed, looked at his mistress and then turned to his wife and told her to kiss Alice. He told Alexandra to kiss the mistress, in front of everyone. That was the moment Alexandra's composure finally cracked. She had endured 47 years of humiliation. And in his final hours, he managed to find a new way to wound her. Alexandra had Keppel removed from the room. Keppel was reportedly distraught, crying as she was taken out. Edward lost consciousness shortly after and died on May 6, 1910. at the funeral. Alice Keppel was allowed to attend, but only through a side entrance. Alexandra, as always, entered through the front. Alexandra of Denmark died on November 20th, 1925 at Sandringham House. She was 80 years old. She had been Princess of Wales for 38 years longer than anyone before or since. She had been queen for 9 years. She had watched her sister become Empress of Russia and then lose everything in the revolution. She had buried children. She had gone deaf. She had been publicly humiliated by the most powerful man in her world, repeatedly, for nearly 5 decades. And Britain loved her not with the polite affection they gave most royals, but with something closer to protective loyalty. When she was ill, the public grief was genuine. When she appeared in public, the cheering was for her. She is remembered today through Alexandra Rose Day, a British charity tradition still observed in her name. The world's largest butterfly, the Queen Alexandra's birdwing, was named in her honor, not because she held power, but because of what she chose to do with the pain that came with it. They gave her a husband who humiliated her, a court that watched it happen, and a country that handed her a crown while he handed it to someone else. And she not once let any of them see her break. Except for one moment. On one day. And now you know which one.